Good morning, everybody. I want to say Happy New Year's Eve to everyone, although this video probably won't even load until New Year's Day. But today's subject is freedom, and what is freedom? And is freedom the ability for me to speak my mind on these videos, or is freedom something more social, group-oriented, or what? I want to start off this video by playing you a little clip from a lecture that I'm listening to. The philosopher is Dennis Dalton. He's a modern day, he's actually a university professor, and he's telling a story on this lecture that I wanted to play for you guys. I can't believe I actually found it because it's lost in like a 45-minute lecture somewhere in the middle. While I was on my way to work, I heard it and tried to note the time in my head. So I did find it, and I'm going to play it, and it's a quick little story about, you may have heard it before, I've heard it a dozen times, but I think it's time I share it with other people. And this is very much related to my subject, so I'll go ahead and just hit it.
That illustrates the way in which the highest kind of freedom is attained. The story goes like this. A person enters a darkened room. He needs to obtain something from that room. But he's fearful because he sees in the corner of the room an object. And that object that he sees seems to be a snake. There's a form there, sort of quivering, and he imagines that it's a cobra. So he flees the room in fear. But he needs that object in the room. So he goes back to it, and there's more light. And he sees that perhaps it isn't a snake at all. Perhaps it's something else, but he can't be sure, so he decides he'll wait until there's still more light, and he leaves the room to come back again. He comes back, and the room is fully lit, and he sees that it wasn't a snake at all. It was a rope hanging there. And he retrieves his object, but he moves about the room, as we may move about the world when we're in tune with ultimate reality, without fear. The dispelling of fear, then, is a result of greater vision, of more light, of a kind of enlightenment that can show us that the object that we thought was a snake, or perhaps a stranger or an enemy, was not that at all. Rather, that object is simply something of which we need have no fear.
I can leave it at that. That's perfect. I love that little story. That's one of my favorites. It's, I'm sure some of you can see how I really enjoy that story. It really reflects on the way I see society. People are afraid to enter the room they may enter the room of a particular subject, okay? Like freedom, let's say. And when they get to that room, they look around and they see that there's so much that they can't understand that they choose to shut themselves off and close the door. And gradually you will gain more and more knowledge towards that subject, and finally when you go back to that subject again, you realize that you're enlightened on it and you have more awareness. Now don't get me wrong, the word enlightenment to me does not mean that you are all inclusively aware of everything. I firmly do not believe that there is a state of enlightenment in which an individual is complete in the sense of done with life, I guess, because enlightenment would mean you'd gained all the knowledge you need to have to some people, but that's not it at all. So the room becomes enlightened. You know, it's funny they mentioned the snake, because when he was speaking about that, I had dreams last night about snakes. And I didn't remember it at all until I heard that little part on the way to work. And it's very interesting the way, okay, I could use this as the dark room. For someone who's unaware of symbolism, might have a dream about snakes. And from one point of view think, well, you're dreaming about evil, because that's, the snake from the Garden of Eden. You're being... you're trying to be called upon, whatever it might be, whatever a person might believe. A person who is aware of more the philosophical angle of it realizes that snakes are a symbol of intellect and a symbol of wisdom and awareness. This is why the Garden of Eden, this is why the snake tried to get them to eat out of the Garden of Knowledge. This is the symbol of the serpent, has been there forever. So in one sense I could say I'm dreaming of something bad. Another sense I could say I'm dreaming of something good. But being completely open on this subject, I could also realize that I was talking to somebody yesterday about snakes. Somebody who said that they were slimy, and I said, they're not slimy, what are you talking about? And being aware of all the angles on the subject doesn't allow you to draw conclusions and be afraid that there is a snake in the corner. So freedom, how's this tie into freedom? What is freedom? I mean, it's not the right, I hate to say this because this is the way Manly Hall always put it. Freedom is not the right to do as we please. I must have heard him say that 100 times, not kidding. And I understand where he's coming from. He's frustrated. He was a frustrated philosopher towards the later part of his life. You can tell by the way his lectures. This is how a person's life goes, that the things we realize were freedoms, the way we think that our Western society operates, a democracy. Democracy has failed. And there have been many angles on this, but the idea that freedom means we have the right to do what we want is completely inadequate and inept to work for a world where the betterment of all man is the goal. So freedom is awareness. Freedom is the ability to distinguish that snake behind the rope, or I should say the rope. Distinguish the rope from the snake. And to do it without even batting an eye, just without a second thought. The idea of a philosopher rule is one that has gained a lot of popularity through the ages, but has lost a lot in modern day. And I think that's due to the fact that most philosophers don't want to rule. You see, once you have a certain view on life, you realize that you want to opt out of that system of control. But still we need people to help us to gain our freedoms. And so freedom is in the individual. What that story is telling us is that freedom is the ability to not fear things that we don't know. And if you break it down to its core essence, our fears are very, very simple. We have a fear of loss, we have a fear of death, and we have a fear of pain and suffering. That's just my off-the-bat view. It usually has something to do with suffering, whether we suffer or someone else is suffering. We're afraid that our loved one might get sick. We're afraid we might get sick. But the fear of things like, say, losing a job, that's the fear of suffering. That's the fear of not having enough money to make it by. The fear of getting beat up, that's the fear of suffering. And death is the ultimate end to suffering. And so when I say the ultimate fear is death, that's what I mean, kind of rooted in death. That's where it always goes back to. And the idea is to fear nothing. Fear nothing. I mean, I really respect some of these people who have been able to give their lives in the pursuit of truth. Some of them willingly, like Socrates who drank the hemlock, but this isn't always the best approach, and there are many different angles to it. So what is freedom? Freedom is not America. The story, when that lecturer, the philosopher was talking, he was saying how when he was 18 years old, he was, I think it was, he said when he was younger, he thought that America was the ultimate pinnacle of freedom. That America stood for what everyone wanted to aspire to. But as the information came forward over the years about the truth about how others were suffering because of America's, quote, freedoms, he had to adjust his opinion accordingly and realize that no, this isn't freedom. That yes, I've been standing up for a country I thought was so great. Yes, I've been talking as if this is the best place on earth to live, but in the end, I was wrong. A lot of people love their country. My question is why? Why do you love your country? I'm not saying that you shouldn't. I'm just asking the question, presenting a question of, for what reasons do you love your country? Is it just because people say to love your country? Is it because of the things that your country does for you? If so, what? Is it for what your country does for the rest of the world? And if so, what? We love our country because we claim to have freedoms. And those freedoms are dependent upon others' loss of freedoms. The more we run short on resources, the more we will take. That's not freedom. Freedom is not using your power to take more. Freedom is the ability to live with less and to know thyself. But ultimately, it has nothing to do with wealth and everything to do with the mind. So that's what I got. I'll end it there because it gets long. And thanks everybody for watching, and I hope you all have a great New Year's